The sun was setting over the small town of Crestwood, Alabama, casting long shadows across its quiet streets. It was a place where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. The air carried the faint smell of freshly cut grass and the distant hum of cicadas. On this particular evening, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But for Marcus Johnson, an unassuming man in his early 30s, life was about to take a sharp and unexpected turn. Marcus had always been a private person. He didn't talk much, preferring to keep to himself. His neighbors often wondered what he did for work, since he disappeared for weeks at a time and returned looking both weary and focused. Some speculated that he worked as a truck driver or maybe traveled for business. No one guessed the truth, that Marcus Johnson was a decorated Navy SEAL. Years of training had taught him discipline, patience, and how to handle high-pressure situations with calm precision. But none of that mattered tonight. It all started when Marcus was driving home from the grocery store. His old sedan rattled slightly as he turned onto Maple Street, the same road he'd driven down countless times before. As he approached the corner near the park, blue and red lights flashed behind him. Startled but not alarmed, Marcus pulled over to the side of the road. He glanced in the rearview mirror and saw two police officers step out of their cruiser. One of them walked toward his car while the other lingered by the patrol vehicle, watching. "License and registration," the officer said gruffly, leaning down to peer through the window. Marcus nodded, reaching slowly into his pocket for his wallet and then opening the glove compartment to retrieve the registration papers. He handed them over without saying a word, knowing better than to ask questions prematurely. The officer, Kevin Doyle, studied the documents carefully. He was a tall man with a square jaw and an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. "You got a broken taillight," he said finally, pointing toward the back of Marcus's car. "Didn't you notice?" Marcus frowned slightly. A broken taillight? That couldn't be right. He checked his vehicle regularly, especially after returning from long trips. Still, arguing wasn't going to help. "I'll get it fixed tomorrow," he replied evenly. Kevin's eyes narrowed. There was something about Marcus's tone, calm, measured, that irritated him. Most people would have been apologetic, maybe even nervous, but Marcus just sat there, composed and unruffled. "Step out of the car," Kevin ordered abruptly. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. He wasn't sure why the officer wanted him to exit the vehicle. Was there some kind of issue beyond the alleged taillight? Sensing trouble brewing, he decided to comply. Slowly, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out onto the pavement, keeping his hands visible. "What's this about?" Marcus asked, his voice steady. Kevin ignored the question. Instead, he began circling Marcus like a predator sizing up its prey. "Where are you coming from?" he demanded. "The grocery store," Marcus answered, gesturing toward the bag sitting on the passenger seat. "You can see the receipt if you want." "No need to get smart," Kevin snapped. His partner, Brian Foster, joined him now, standing a few feet away with his arms crossed. Together, they loomed over Marcus, creating an intimidating presence. Marcus felt a familiar tension building in his chest. He recognized the signs, a situation escalating unnecessarily, fueled by assumptions and biases. In his line of work, he'd encountered similar scenarios overseas, where misunderstandings could quickly spiral into violence. Here, though, he reminded himself that these were local cops, not enemy combatants. Surely reason would prevail, but it didn't. When Kevin asked Marcus if he had anything illegal in the car, Marcus politely declined consent to a search, citing his constitutional rights. That was the tipping point. Kevin's face reddened with anger, and he barked, "Don't play games with me." Before Marcus could respond, the officer grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to the ground. Pain shot through Marcus's shoulder as his cheek pressed against the cold asphalt. He clenched his teeth, resisting the urge to fight back. This wasn't the battlefield, this was his hometown. Fighting wouldn't solve anything, it would only make things worse. So he stayed still, enduring the rough treatment silently. Ramore. Her porch across the street, Lisa Harper watched the scene unfold with growing unease. She had known Marcus for years, ever since he moved into the neighborhood. Quiet and respectful, he always waved hello and kept his yard tidy. Seeing him treated this way felt wrong, but she hesitated to intervene. After all, what could she do? Calling the police wouldn't help. They were already there. Meanwhile, Kevin and Brian hauled Marcus to his feet and shoved him into the back of their cruiser. Resisting arrest, Kevin muttered under his breath as he slammed the door shut. To anyone passing by, it might have looked justified. But Lisa noticed the lack of resistance, the absence of aggression on Marcus's part. Something wasn't adding up. At the station, the ordeal continued. Kevin mocked Marcus openly, referring to him as just another punk who thought he was above the law. Brian chimed in with a sneer, asking if Marcus planned to call his gang buddies for backup. Neither officer bothered to listen when Marcus tried to explain himself. They weren't interested in explanations. They had already made up their minds. What they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any man. Beneath his calm exterior lay years of rigorous training and experience in some of the most dangerous environments imaginable. He had faced gunfire, endured harsh conditions, and completed missions that pushed the limits of human endurance. Yet here he was, handcuffed and ridiculed, accused of crimes he hadn't committed. As the hours dragged on, Marcus remained silent. Speaking wouldn't change their minds, and reacting impulsively would only validate their stereotypes. Patience, he reminded himself, was key. Let them believe what they wanted. For now. The truth would come out eventually. Back in the neighborhood, Lisa couldn't shake the image of Marcus being forced into the police car. Her conscience nagged at her, until she finally picked up the phone and dialed Nicole Johnson, Marcus's younger sister. Nicole lived several states away working as a nurse, but Lisa knew she needed to hear about what happened. "This is serious, Nicole," Lisa said urgently. "They arrested your brother, and it didn't look right. Not at all." Nicole listened, intently, her heart sinking with every word. She trusted her brother implicitly and found it hard to believe he'd done anything wrong. Determined to help, she promised to book the next available flight to Crestwood. Until then, she urged Lisa to gather any information she could. Witness statements, photos, anything that might prove useful later. By the time Nicole arrived in town 2 days later, news of Marcus's arrest had spread throughout Crestwood. Some residents sided with the police, quick to assume guilt based on appearances alone. Others, however, shared Lisa's suspicions, questioning whether justice was truly being served. For Marcus, trapped in a system stacked against him, the battle was far from over. Little did anyone realize that the quiet man at the center of the storm held secrets capable of turning the entire narrative upside down. The courtroom was small and stuffy, filled with the kind of tension that made it hard to breathe. Rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators who had gathered to watch the trial unfold. Some were friends or family members of Marcus Johnson, while others came out of curiosity or a desire to see justice served, or so they claimed. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee, remnants of countless cases that had played out in this very room. Marcus sat at the defense table, his posture straight but relaxed. He wore a plain gray suit, borrowed from his sister Nicole, who had insisted he look presentable for court. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, as though he were observing something far away instead of participating in the drama before him. Beside him sat Daniel Carter, his court-appointed attorney. Daniel was a wiry man in his late 40s with thinning hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He wasn't flashy or charismatic, but he had a quiet determination that gave Marcus some hope. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Rachel Gray exuded confidence. She was younger than Daniel, maybe in her early 30s, with sharp features and an air of authority that commanded attention. Her dark blazer fit perfectly, and her neatly styled hair framed a face that rarely showed emotion. Rachel had built her career on winning tough cases, often using aggressive tactics to sway juries. Today, she seemed ready to do whatever it took to secure a conviction against Marcus. The judge, an older man named Harold Bennett, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said, his voice firm but tired. The trial had barely started, yet already it felt like a heavy weight pressing down on everyone in the room. Rachel stood first, addressing the jury with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, pacing slowly in front of them, "this case is about accountability. It's about what happens when someone chooses to resist lawful authority and endanger the lives of those sworn to protect us." Her tone was measured, but there was an edge to her words, an implication that Marcus was guilty simply because she said so. She went on to paint a vivid picture of the events leading up to Marcus's arrest. According to Rachel, Kevin Doyle and Brian Foster, the two officers involved, had pulled Marcus over for a routine traffic stop. When asked to step out of the car, Marcus allegedly became belligerent, refusing to comply and even threatening the officers verbally. Rachel described him as dangerous, unpredictable, and disrespectful, a threat to public safety. "Does that sound like the actions of an innocent man?" Rachel asked, turning toward the jury with raised eyebrows. "Or does it sound like someone who thought he was above the law?" The jurors exchanged glances, some nodding slightly as if agreeing with her logic. Marcus clenched his jaw but kept his composure. He knew better than to react visibly. Doing so would only play into Rachel's narrative. Instead, he focused on breathing steadily, reminding himself that patience was key. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he approached the jury cautiously, aware of how much was at stake. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice softer than Rachel's but no less deliberate, "what you've heard so far is one side of the story, a version presented by the prosecution without all the facts." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "My client, Marcus Johnson, is not the person they're describing. He's a hard-working man who has lived in Crestwood for years, minding his own business and contributing to his community." Daniel gestured toward Marcus, who nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "What happened that night was not resistance, it was restraint. My client understood the situation and chose to remain calm, even when confronted with unnecessary aggression. Unfortunately, that restraint has been misinterpreted as guilt." Rachel rolled her eyes subtly, clearly unimpressed by Daniel's argument. But Daniel pressed on, determined to plant seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds. "We intend to show you evidence that contradicts the officer's account, evidence that proves my client did nothing wrong and was treated unfairly because of assumptions based on appearances rather than facts." After opening statements, the trial moved into witness testimony. Kevin Doyle took the stand first, dressed in his uniform and looking every bit the part of a dutiful officer. Rachel guided him through his version of events, asking questions, designed to reinforce the image of Marcus as a troublemaker. "Officer Doyle," Rachel said, leaning slightly forward, "can you describe what happened when you approached Mr. Johnson's vehicle?" Kevin nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. I noticed immediately that his taillight was broken, which is why I initiated the stop. I asked him for his license and registration, and he handed them over without issue. But when I informed him about the taillight and requested that he step out of the car, his demeanor changed." "Changed how?" Rachel prompted. "He became combative," Kevin replied, his voice steady. "He questioned my authority and refused to cooperate fully. At that point, I had no choice but to take control of the situation." "And did Mr. Johnson offer any physical resistance?" Rachel asked, her tone implying the answer she expected. "No, ma'am," Kevin admitted reluctantly. "But his attitude was enough to escalate things. Someone like that, you can never tell what they might do next." Rachel smiled faintly, satisfied with his response. To the jury, it probably sounded convincing. After all, Kevin was a police officer, a figure of authority whose word carried weight. Few people questioned whether officers could exaggerate or fabricate details to justify their actions. Daniel crossed the floor to cross-examine Kevin, his steps deliberate. "Officer Doyle," he began, "you mentioned that Mr. Johnson didn't physically resist arrest, is that correct?" "Yes," Kevin replied, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "So, he complied with your commands once you placed him under arrest?" "Well, yes, technically," Kevin muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Technically?" Daniel repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Isn't compliance either present or absent? There's no middle ground, is there?" Kevin hesitated, unsure. How to respond. Daniel seized the opportunity. You also stated earlier that Mr. Johnson questioned your authority. Can you clarify what he said? Kevin faltered. He asked why I needed to search his car. And is it illegal for a citizen to ask questions during a traffic stop? No, but no further questions, Your Honor. Daniel interrupted smoothly, cutting off whatever excuse Kevin might have offered. As he returned to his seat, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Next, Brian Foster took the stand, echoing many of Kevin's claims. Rachel handled him gently, ensuring his testimony aligned with her narrative. Once again, Daniel worked to chip away at their credibility, pointing out inconsistencies and highlighting moments where their stories diverged slightly. Throughout it all, Marcus remained silent, watching carefully as each witness spoke. He noticed the subtle shifts in body language, the pauses before answers, the way both officers avoided meeting his gaze. These were signs he recognized from his time in the Navy, signs of deception. But proving it in court was another matter entirely. As the day wore on, Nicole sat in the front row behind Marcus, gripping her purse tightly. She had attended every session, determined to support her brother no matter what. Lisa Harper joined, her occasionally, offering updates on efforts to gather additional evidence. Together they represented a quiet but steadfast presence, rooting for Marcus even when the odds seemed stacked against him. Outside the courthouse, reporters lingered, snapping photos and shouting questions whenever anyone emerged. The media had picked up the story, framing it as a clash between law enforcement and a local resident accused of resisting arrest. Headlines ranged from neutral to inflammatory, depending on the outlet. Some portrayed Marcus as a victim of racial profiling, while others echoed the prosecution's claims of guilt. Despite the chaos, Marcus maintained his focus. He knew the trial wouldn't end quickly. It rarely did. But he also knew that revealing too much too soon could jeopardize his defense. For now, he had to trust Daniel and wait for the right moment to share his truth. By the time court adjourned for the day, exhaustion hung heavy in the air. Marcus thanked Daniel for his efforts and promised to stay patient. Nicole hugged him tightly, whispering words of encouragement. "We'll get through this," she assured him. "Just hang on a little longer." Back home, Marcus sat alone in his living room, staring at the wall. The trial was grueling, not just because of the accusations, but because of the toll it took on his spirit. Yet deep down, he refused to let anger consume him. He reminded himself of the lessons learned during his SEAL training: adaptability, resilience, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new witnesses, and perhaps new opportunities to expose the truth. Until then, Marcus resolved to keep fighting one step at a time. Nicole Johnson arrived in Crestwood with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had booked the earliest flight she could find after Lisa Harper's urgent phone call, but the hours spent traveling had given her plenty of time to think and worry. Her brother Marcus was not just family, he was her hero. Growing up, he had always been the one to protect her, whether it was standing up for her at school or helping her navigate life's challenges. Now, it was her turn to stand by him. When Nicole stepped off the plane, Lisa was waiting for her at the airport. The two women embraced tightly, neither speaking right away. Finally, Lisa pulled back and looked Nicole in the eye. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Marcus needs all the support he can get." "I wouldn't be anywhere else," Nicole replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Tell me everything you know." On the drive back to Crestwood, Lisa filled Nicole in on the details of the arrest and the trial so far. She described how the officers had treated Marcus during the traffic stop, their aggressive behavior, and the way they mocked him afterward. Lisa also mentioned her own hesitation to intervene that night, something she clearly regretted now. "I should have done more," she admitted, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Maybe if I'd spoken up sooner, things would have been different." Nicole placed a reassuring hand on Lisa's arm. "You're doing something now, and that matters. We'll figure this out together." Once they reached Crestwood, Nicole went straight to Marcus's house. The modest brick home was quiet when she walked in, but she found her brother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into a small smile. "Hey, sis," he said, his voice warm despite the fatigue in his eyes. "Hey yourself," Nicole responded, pulling him into a hug. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nicole pulled back and studied his face. "How are you holding up?" "As well as can be expected," Marcus said with a shrug. "It's frustrating, but I'm trying to stay focused." Nicole nodded, though she could see the strain behind his calm exterior. She sat down across from him and took a deep breath. "We need to fight back, Marcus, really fight. Not just let them say whatever they want without pushing back harder." Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I know, but revealing too much too soon might make things worse. Trust me, I've thought about it." Nicole frowned. "What do you mean? You can't just sit there and take this. They're tearing you apart in court because they don't know who you really are." "That's exactly why I haven't said anything yet," Marcus explained patiently. "If I come out swinging with my Navy SEAL background, people will either think I'm using it as an excuse or they'll dismiss everything else I say. Timing is everything." Nicole sighed, running a hand through her hair. She hated seeing her brother like this, so composed, yet so trapped by circumstances beyond his control. Still, she respected his reasoning. If anyone understood strategy, it was Marcus. But that didn't mean she had to sit idly by while injustice unfolded. The next day, Nicole met with Lisa to discuss what they could do to help. Lisa suggested reaching out to someone who might have connections or resources to dig deeper into the case. "What about Eric Dawson?" Lisa asked hesitantly. "He used to be close with Marcus back in the day, didn't he?" Nicole's eyes widened. "Eric? Why didn't I think of him sooner?" Eric Dawson was an old friend of Marcus's from their Navy days. After leaving the military, Eric had become a private investigator, known for his sharp instincts and ability to uncover hidden truths. If anyone could find evidence to support Marcus's defense, it was Eric. Without wasting any time, Nicole tracked down Eric's contact information and called him. To her relief, he answered almost immediately. "Nicole, is that you?" His deep voice carried a hint of surprise. "Long time no hear." "Hi, Eric," Nicole said, getting straight to the point. "Listen, I need your help. It's about Marcus." Eric's tone shifted instantly. "What's going on? Is he okay?" Nicole explained the situation, starting with the traffic stop and ending with the ongoing trial. By the time she finished, Eric was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice firm. "Send me everything you've got. I'll look into it." Over the next few days, Eric dove into the case with relentless energy. He reviewed police reports, interviewed witnesses, and even managed to obtain security footage from a nearby gas station that captured part of the incident. The video wasn't perfect. It was grainy and shot from a distance, but it showed enough to raise questions about the officer's version of events. In the footage, Marcus appeared calm and cooperative, contradicting the claim that he had resisted arrest. Armed with this new evidence, Eric arranged to meet Nicole and Marcus at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. When they arrived, Eric greeted them warmly before diving into business. "Here's what I've found," he said, spreading photos and documents across the table. "This traffic cam video shows you Marcus being pulled over. You're not resisting, not arguing. You're just following instructions." Marcus studied the images carefully, nodding slowly. "That's consistent with what happened," he said. "But will it be enough to sway the jury?" "It's a start," Eric replied. "We can use this to challenge the officer's credibility. But we need more than just evidence. We need strategy." Nicole leaned forward, her expression intense. "What if we reveal who Marcus really is? Wouldn't that change how people see him?" Eric hesitated, glancing at Marcus. "It could work, but it's risky. Revealing your SEAL background might humanize you in the eyes of the jury, but it could also backfire if handled poorly. Some people might assume you're using it to justify bad behavior." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. If we go that route, we have to do it carefully. Maybe Daniel can incorporate it into his closing argument. Eric agreed, adding, "In the meantime, let's focus on discrediting the officer's testimony. I've already flagged inconsistencies in their statements, and the video supports your side of the story. We'll hit them hard with those points first." As the meeting wrapped up, Nicole felt a renewed sense of hope. With Eric's help, they finally had a plan, a real chance to turn the tide in Marcus's favor. But she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Convincing a skeptical jury to believe their version of events would require more than just evidence. It would take skill, timing, and a little bit of luck. Back at the courthouse the following week, tensions ran high as the trial resumed. Daniel Carter, armed with the new evidence provided by Eric, began cross-examining Brian Foster. Using stills from the traffic cam video, Daniel highlighted moments where Brian's account didn't match reality. "Officer Foster," Daniel said, pointing to a frame showing Marcus calmly handing over his license, "does this look like resistance to you?" Brian squirmed under the scrutiny, stammered slightly, and finally muttered, "Well, maybe not outright resistance, but his attitude was confrontational." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "An attitude you interpreted as threatening based solely on your perception?" "Yes," Brian admitted reluctantly. "And isn't it possible," Daniel pressed, "that your perception was influenced by preconceived notions rather than actual behavior?" Before Brian could respond, Rachel Gray objected loudly. "Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness." The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sustained. Move on, Mr. Carter." Despite the interruption, Daniel had planted seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds. Each inconsistency he exposed chipped away at the prosecution's narrative, creating cracks in their otherwise polished case. Meanwhile, Marcus observed silently, his faith in Daniel growing stronger with every passing moment. Outside the courtroom, Nicole and Lisa continued their efforts to rally support for Marcus. They organized community meetings, inviting neighbors and friends to share their thoughts about the case. Many were outraged by the treatment Marcus had received, while others remained hesitant to speak out publicly. Nicole understood their fear, but refused to let it deter her. "If we stay quiet, nothing will change," she told the group gathered in Lisa's living room. "We have to stand together." One attendee, a retired teacher named Margaret, offered to write letters to local newspapers highlighting the flaws in the prosecution's case. Another neighbor, James, volunteered to film interviews with residents who supported Marcus, hoping to create a short documentary-style video for social media. Slowly but surely, momentum began to build. Meanwhile, Eric worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering additional evidence and preparing for potential surprises from the prosecution. He cautioned Nicole and Marcus against complacency, reminding them that trials were unpredictable. "Stay ready for anything," he advised. "This isn't over until the verdict comes in." As the days turned into weeks, Marcus drew strength from the growing network of allies around him. For the first time since his arrest, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of optimism. The journey was far from over, but with each passing day, the truth seemed closer within reach. The trial had reached a critical stage. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Daniel Carter prepared to introduce the new evidence uncovered by Eric Dawson. It was a turning point, one that could either tilt the scales in Marcus's favor or fall flat if mishandled. Nicole sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together, while Lisa leaned forward anxiously beside her. Marcus remained calm, his expression unreadable, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of hope. Daniel stood up, holding a folder filled with documents and still images pulled from the traffic cam video. He approached the jury box slowly, making sure to maintain eye contact with each juror. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but deliberate, "what we're about to present challenges the story you've been told so far." He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit C into evidence, a surveillance video taken from a nearby gas station on the night of the incident." The judge nodded, allowing the footage to be shown. A screen was wheeled into the center of the room, and the lights dimmed slightly. Everyone watched intently as the grainy black and white clip played. In the video, Marcus's car came to a stop along the curb. Moments later, the police cruiser pulled up behind him. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it clearly showed Marcus stepping out of his vehicle calmly, keeping his hands visible at all times. There was no sign of resistance, no aggressive movements, just a man following instructions. When the officers moved toward him, their body language appeared dominating, almost threatening. One officer grabbed Marcus's arm roughly before forcing him to the ground. As the footage ended, Daniel turned back to the jury. This video contradicts the officer's claims that Mr. Johnson resisted arrest or acted belligerently. In fact, it shows quite the opposite, that my client complied fully, even when treated unjustly. Rachel Gray shot to her feet, objecting loudly. "Your Honor, this is speculative interpretation. The video is unclear and doesn't capture audio, which leaves room for misrepresentation." "Overruled," Judge Bennett said firmly. The jury will consider this evidence alongside everything else presented in court." Rachel scowled but quickly regained her composure. She knew she couldn't let Daniel gain too much ground. During her cross-examination of Kevin Doyle later that day, she tried to downplay the significance of the video. "Officer Doyle," she asked, "does this footage change your recollection of events?" Kevin shook his head confidently. "No, ma'am. The video only shows part of what happened. It doesn't capture the tone of Mr. Johnson's voice or his refusal to cooperate verbally." Daniel seized the opportunity during his own questioning. "So, Officer Doyle, are you saying that verbal resistance justifies physical force? That simply asking questions gives you the right to throw someone to the ground?" Kevin hesitated, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "It depends on the context," he muttered, avoiding direct eye contact. "And who decides the context?" Daniel pressed. "You? Or should it be based on objective facts?" Before Kevin could respond, Rachel objected again, cutting off the line of questioning. But the damage was done. Doubt had crept into the jurors' minds, evident in the way some of them exchanged skeptical glances. Outside the courthouse, the case was gaining national attention. Local news outlets had picked up the story, and soon it spread across social media platforms. Clips of the trial, including the traffic cam video, went viral. People were outraged by the officer's behavior and frustrated by the lack of accountability. Hashtags like "Samir Justice for Marcus" and "Adu Truth Matters" began trending, drawing comments from activists, celebrities, and everyday citizens alike. Nicole and Lisa worked tirelessly to keep the momentum going. They organized rallies outside the courthouse, inviting speakers who shared stories of racial profiling and police misconduct. Margaret, the retired teacher, read excerpts from letters she had written to newspapers, highlighting the need for reform. James screened his short documentary-style video, featuring interviews with neighbors who vouched for Marcus's character. One evening, after a particularly long day in court, Nicole received a call from Eric Dawson. "I think it's time," he said without preamble. "We need to reveal Marcus's background. The public support is growing, and now is the moment to strike." Nicole hesitated. Revealing Marcus's identity as a Navy SEAL was risky. It could sway opinions in unpredictable ways. Still, she trusted Eric's judgment. "Let's talk to Marcus first," she replied. That night, Nicole and Eric met with Marcus at his house. They explained their plan carefully, emphasizing the potential risks and rewards. Marcus listened quietly, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally, he spoke. "If we do this, we have to make sure it's not just about me. This isn't just my fight, it's bigger than that. We need to use it to shine a light on systemic issues." Nicole nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "That's exactly why we're doing this, Marcus. You're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for everyone who's been treated unfairly." With Marcus's approval, they began preparing for a press conference. Eric reached out to veteran organizations and community leaders, asking them to attend and show solidarity. Meanwhile, Nicole wrote a statement for Marcus to deliver, ensuring it focused not on personal vindication but on broader themes of justice and equality. The press conference took place 2 days later in front of the courthouse. Reporters jostled, For position, cameras clicking and microphones thrust forward as Marcus stepped onto the makeshift stage. Flanked by Nicole, Lisa, Eric, and several veterans, he stood tall, exuding quiet strength. For a moment, he simply looked out at the crowd, letting the gravity of the moment settle over everyone. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he began, his voice strong and clear. "I am a resident of Crestwood, Alabama. I am also a decorated Navy SEAL who has served my country honorably for over a decade. What happened to me on the night of my arrest was not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of injustice that affects countless individuals every day." He paused, scanning the sea of faces before continuing. "I didn't resist arrest because I know better than to escalate a situation unnecessarily. My training taught me discipline and restraint, yet here I am, accused of resisting arrest and treated like a criminal simply because of assumptions made about me." The crowd erupted in murmurs, many people visibly shocked by the revelation. Marcus raised a hand to quiet them. "This isn't about me being a SEAL. It's about fairness. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, background, or profession. If my story can spark a conversation about these issues, then maybe something good can come out of this experience." When he finished speaking, the audience erupted in applause. Veterans in attendance saluted him while others chanted his name. Reporters shouted questions, but Marcus declined to answer, leaving the stage with Nicole and Eric by his side. Inside the courthouse the next morning, the atmosphere felt different. Jurors glanced at Marcus with newfound curiosity, while Rachel Gray seemed flustered, clearly unprepared for this development. During her closing argument, she attempted to discredit the revelation, suggesting that Marcus's military background had nothing to do with the case. "Just because someone served in the military doesn't mean they're incapable of wrongdoing," she argued. But Daniel countered effectively during his own closing statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, pacing slowly in front of them, "Marcus Johnson's actions, or lack thereof, on the night of his arrest reflect years of training and discipline. His restraint in the face of provocation speaks volumes about his character. Does that sound like the actions of a guilty man, or does it sound like someone who understood the importance of staying calm under pressure?" As Daniel wrapped up his remarks, the courtroom fell silent. Even Rachel seemed subdued, sensing that the tide had shifted. Judge Bennett instructed the jury to begin deliberations, reminding them to weigh all evidence impartially. Back home, Marcus waited anxiously, surrounded by Nicole, Lisa, and Eric. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling longer than the last. Finally, late in the afternoon, a bailiff arrived to inform them that a verdict had been reached. When they returned to the courtroom, tension hung thick in the air. As the foreman stood to announce the decision, Marcus took a deep breath, bracing himself for whatever came next. "On the charge of resisting arrest," the foreman declared, "we find the defendant not guilty." A wave of relief washed over Marcus as cheers erupted from the gallery. Nicole hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face while Lisa clapped enthusiastically. Even Daniel allowed himself a rare smile, patting Marcus on the shoulder. Outside, supporters gathered to celebrate, chanting Marcus's name and waving signs demanding justice reform. Cameras flashed as reporters clamored for interviews, but Marcus declined, choosing instead to stand quietly among those who had supported him throughout the ordeal. Though the trial was over, Marcus knew the fight wasn't. He vowed to continue advocating for change, using his platform to push for greater accountability and fairness in law enforcement practices. For now, however, he allowed himself a moment of peace, grateful for the love and resilience that had carried him through the storm. The verdict reverberated through Crestwood like a thunderclap, shaking the foundations of a town that had long prided itself on quiet routines and predictable lives. For Marcus Johnson, the word "not guilty" was more than just a legal outcome. It was validation, relief, and a chance to reclaim his life. But it wasn't the end of the story. If anything, it marked the beginning of something bigger, something far-reaching. As Marcus stepped out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight, he was greeted by a sea of faces, neighbors, friends, strangers, who had followed his case online, and veterans who wore their pride openly on their sleeves. Some held signs with messages like, "Justice prevails" and "Accountability matters," while others simply cheered, clapping until their hands stung. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed incessantly, but Marcus remained calm, his gaze steady as he scanned the crowd. Nicole stood beside him, her arm linked through his, her face glowing with pride and exhaustion. She had fought tirelessly for this moment, pouring every ounce of energy into supporting her brother. Now she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't fully realized she'd been carrying. Lisa Harper was there too, standing slightly behind them, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her guilt over not intervening sooner had transformed into determination, and now she felt vindicated in having spoken up when it mattered most. "Thank you," Marcus said simply, raising a hand to quiet the cheering crowd. His voice carried authority, a tone shaped by years of leadership and discipline. "This isn't just my victory. It belongs to everyone who stood by me, believed in me, and demanded fairness. But let's be clear, this is only one step. There's still work to do." His words resonated deeply. People nodded in agreement, some murmuring softly among themselves. The trial may have ended, but its implications stretched far beyond Crestwood. Across the nation, conversations about racial profiling, police accountability, and systemic injustice gained renewed urgency. Marcus's case became a symbol, a rallying cry for those seeking change. Back at home, Marcus sat alone in his living room, the silence around him almost deafening after days filled with noise and chaos. He leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past weeks in his mind. The trial had tested him, not just legally, but emotionally and mentally. He thought about the officers who had mocked him, the prosecutor, who painted him as a threat, and the jurors who ultimately chose to see the truth. He wondered what lessons they would take away from all of this, if any. Nicole found him there later, sitting quietly with a cup of tea in his hands. She hesitated, before speaking, unsure whether to break the silence. Finally she asked, "How are you feeling?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Tired," he admitted, "but also hopeful. This feels like a chance to start fresh, to use what happened for something good." Nicole sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You've already inspired so many people. Look at how the community came together. That doesn't happen often. It shouldn't have to take something like this to bring people together," Marcus replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "We shouldn't need a viral video or a high-profile trial to remind us that everyone deserves respect. That's the problem." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Eventually, Nicole spoke again. "What's next for you? What do you want to do now?" Marcus took a deep breath, considering the question. "I think I want to focus on mentorship," he said finally. "Young kids need guidance, especially in communities like ours. If I can help even one person avoid ending up in a situation like mine, it'll be worth it." Nicole smiled, her eyes lighting up. "That's a great idea. You'd be amazing at it." Inspired by Marcus's vision, Nicole decided to pursue a career in criminal law. She enrolled in night classes at a nearby college, balancing her studies with her job as a nurse. It wasn't easy, long hours at work followed by late nights poring over textbooks, but she felt driven by purpose. Every assignment, every lecture reminded her of why she was doing this: to fight for justice, to ensure that cases like Marcus's didn't slip through the cracks again. Lisa Harper also underwent a transformation. No longer content to stay on the sidelines, she became an outspoken advocate for police reform in Crestwood. She organized workshops and forums, inviting experts to speak about implicit bias, de-escalation techniques, and the importance of transparency in law enforcement. At first, turnout was modest, but as word spread, more residents began attending, eager to learn and contribute to meaningful change. Eric Dawson stayed involved too, using his skills as a private investigator to assist others facing similar challenges. He partnered with veteran organizations to provide pro bono services, helping individuals navigate complex legal systems. Occasionally, he checked in on Marcus, offering advice or simply sharing stories over coffee. Their friendship deepened during this time, forged by shared struggles and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Kevin Doyle and Brian Foster faced consequences for their actions, or lack thereof. Internal investigations revealed inconsistencies in their testimonies and raised questions about their conduct during the traffic stop. Both officers were suspended pending further review, though public outcry demanded harsher penalties. Letters poured into the police department, calling for accountability and reforms in training protocols. Some suggested implementing body cameras for all officers, while others pushed for independent oversight committees to handle complaints against law enforcement. The media coverage of Marcus's trial continued to spark debates across the country. Talk shows invited activists, lawyers, and former military personnel to discuss the broader issues highlighted by his case. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions about privilege, bias, and the responsibilities of those in positions of power. Marcus himself avoided interviews, preferring to let his actions speak louder than words. However, he did agree to participate in a panel discussion hosted by a local university, where he shared insights from his experiences as both a civilian and a Navy SEAL. During the event, a young man named Jamal approached Marcus afterward. Jamal was a teenager from Crestwood, someone who had grown up idolizing soldiers and dreaming of joining the military someday, but recent events had left him disillusioned, questioning whether serving his country was worth the risk of being treated unfairly upon returning home. "I don't know if I should still try to enlist," Jamal confessed, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "After everything you went through, I'm not sure it's worth it." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Being a soldier, a sailor, or a Marine, it's about more than just fighting battles. It's about representing values like honor, integrity, and service. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Yes, the world isn't perfect, but people like you have the power to make it better." Jamal nodded slowly, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, sir. I needed to hear that." Inspired by moments like these, Marcus and Eric launched a mentorship program aimed at guiding young people toward careers in public service. They collaborated with schools, community centers, and veteran groups to create workshops focused on leadership, teamwork, and ethical decision-making. Veterans volunteered their time to share stories and offer advice, emphasizing the importance of resilience and compassion. As months passed, Crestwood began to change, not dramatically, but noticeably. Conversations once avoided were now happening openly. Residents attended town hall meetings to voice concerns and propose solutions. Police officers participated in sensitivity training sessions, learning how to approach situations with empathy rather than aggression. Progress was slow, uneven, and sometimes painful, but it was progress nonetheless. For Marcus, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. He resumed his routine, spending mornings tending to his garden and evenings reading books on history and philosophy. Yet beneath the surface, he carried a newfound sense of purpose. His ordeal had taught him that adversity could be transformed into opportunity, that scars, no matter how deep, could heal when met with courage and determination. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the sky, Marcus stood on his porch, watching the neighborhood settle into dusk. Nicole joined him, leaning against the railing as they shared a rare moment of quiet reflection. "I've done so much already," Nicole said softly. "Do you ever feel like you've earned a break?" Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "Breaks are for people who finish their work, and we're nowhere near done yet." Nicole smiled, knowing he was right. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but they were ready. Together they had weathered the storm and emerged stronger for it. Months had passed since the trial ended, and Crestwood was beginning to feel different. The town wasn't perfect. Change never came overnight. But there were signs of progress everywhere you looked. Conversations about justice reform continued, at coffee shops, schools, and community centers. People who once avoided discussing uncomfortable topics now embraced them, eager to learn and grow. Marcus Johnson, once an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary circumstances, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. Marcus himself settled back into his quiet life, though it was far from the solitude he'd known before. His days were filled with purpose now. He spent mornings mentoring young people through the program he and Eric Dawson had started. At first, the turnout was small, a handful of curious teenagers and a few parents hoping their kids would find direction. But as word spread, more families joined in, drawn by Marcus's calm demeanor and unwavering commitment to helping others succeed. The mentorship sessions weren't just about careers and public service, they were about building character. Marcus often shared stories from his time as a Navy SEAL, not to boast but to teach lessons about discipline, teamwork, and perseverance. "Life will test you," he told the group during one session, "but how you respond defines who you are. You can let challenges break you, or you can use them to make yourself stronger." Jamal, the teenager who had doubted his dreams after the trial, became one of Marcus's most dedicated mentees. With encouragement from Marcus, Jamal decided to apply for a leadership program aimed at preparing students for military academies. When he received his acceptance letter months later, he ran straight to Marcus's house to share the news. "I couldn't have done this without you," Jamal said, beaming with pride. "You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever get, hope." Marcus smiled warmly, patting the young man on the shoulder. "You did the hard work, Jamal. I just pointed you in the right direction." Eric Dawson remained a steadfast ally, contributing his investigative skills to ensure the program ran smoothly. He also helped connect participants with resources, such as scholarships and internships, that could pave the way for brighter futures. Together, Marcus and Eric created a network of support, proving that even small actions could have lasting impacts. Nicole Johnson, meanwhile, threw herself into her studies with relentless determination. Balancing work and school wasn't easy, but she found fulfillment in every late-night study session and every challenging assignment. Her co-workers noticed the change in her. She seemed more focused, more driven, and they rallied around her, offering encouragement whenever she needed. Yet on weekends, Nicole attended legal clinics organized by local advocacy groups. These events provided free assistance to individuals navigating the justice system, many of whom reminded her of Marcus. Each case reinforced her belief that fairness shouldn't depend on privilege or circumstance. By the time she graduated, 2 years later, Nicole had already secured a position at a nonprofit law firm specializing in civil rights cases. Lisa Harper's transformation was equally remarkable. Once hesitant to speak up, she now stood confidently at the forefront of efforts to improve police-community relations. She spearheaded initiatives like Coffee with Cops, informal gatherings where residents could engage with officers in neutral settings. At first, attendance was sparse, but over time, trust began to build. Officers shared insights into their training and decision-making processes, while residents voiced concerns about safety and accountability. One evening, Lisa hosted a forum featuring a panel of experts including Marcus, Eric, and a retired police chief named Robert Hayes. The discussion centered on practical steps toward reform, such as implementing body cameras, establishing independent review boards, and fostering open dialogue between law enforcement and the community. Audience members asked tough questions and panelists responded honestly, acknowledging flaws while proposing solutions. "It's not going to happen overnight," Marcus said during the Q&A session, "but if we keep talking, keep pushing for transparency, we'll get there." The audience erupted in applause, moved by his sincerity and optimism. For Lisa, moments like these validated her decision to step out of her comfort zone. She no longer felt powerless. Instead, she saw herself as part of a collective effort to create meaningful change. As for Kevin Doyle and Brian Foster, their suspensions led to internal investigations that exposed deeper issues within the police department. While neither officer faced criminal charges, both were reassigned to desk jobs, effectively ending their field careers. Public pressure prompted the department to adopt stricter accountability measures, including mandatory de-escalation training and regular performance reviews. Margaret, the retired teacher who had written letters to newspapers early in the trial, expanded her activism beyond words. She collaborated with Lisa to develop educational materials for schools, teaching students about civic responsibility and the importance of standing up against injustice. James, the neighbor who filmed interviews for social media, launched a YouTube channel documenting stories of resilience and courage from across the country. His videos inspired countless viewers, reinforcing the idea that individual actions could spark widespread change. Even Crestwood's mayor took notice of the growing movement. In a town hall meeting, he announced plans to allocate funds for community outreach programs and diversity training for city employees. "We're not just fixing problems here," he said. "We're building a better future for everyone." Marcus watched these developments unfold with cautious optimism. He knew progress was fragile, susceptible to setbacks and resistance, but he also believed in the power of persistence. Every small victory mattered because it brought people closer to understanding one another. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus walked through the park near his home, enjoying the golden leaves crunching underfoot. A group of children played soccer nearby, laughing and shouting as they chased the ball. It was a scene of simple joy, a reminder of why all the hard work mattered. Nicole joined him halfway through his stroll, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you could use a pick-me-up," she said, handing him one of the cups. "Thanks," Marcus replied, taking a sip. "What brings you out here?" "I wanted to check in," Nicole admitted. "You've been so busy lately I hardly see you anymore." Marcus chuckled. "I guess I have been keeping myself occupied. But it feels good, you know? Like I'm making a difference." "You are," Nicole said firmly. "And don't forget, you're not alone in this. We're all here with you." They sat together on a bench overlooking the playground, watching the world go by. For a moment, neither spoke, content in each other's company. Then Nicole broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if things had gone differently? If the jury hadn't believed us?" Marcus thought for a moment, before answering. "Sure, sometimes, but dwelling on what-ifs doesn't help. What matters is what we do next. We've got a chance to set an example, to show people that it's possible to rise above hate and fear." Nicole nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're right, and we're not stopping anytime soon." "Nope," Marcus agreed with a grin. "Not until we've turned this town upside down, for the better." In the months and years that followed, Crestwood continued to evolve. New leaders emerged, driven by a shared vision of equality and justice. Old prejudices softened, replaced by empathy and understanding. Mistakes were made along the way, but they were met with accountability rather than denial. For Marcus Johnson, the journey had been long and difficult, yet it had also been rewarding in ways he never imagined. Through patience, courage, and unwavering integrity, he proved that one person truly could make a difference. And though scars remained, both personal and societal, they served as reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. As the sun set over Crestwood one final time, casting its warm glow across the town, Marcus stood on his porch, gazing at the horizon. Behind him, laughter echoed from inside the house, where Nicole, Lisa, Eric, and several mentees gathered for dinner. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. And for Marcus, that was enough.